França, 1917. O Abril Sangrento, um dos momentos mais mortais da Primeira Guerra Mundial.
There is a violent and cataclysmic battle for control of the skies.
Um homem caça sua presa no céu sobre o interior da França.
The pilot doesn't even know he's there.
Em uma máquina letal criada para destruir os aviões aliados.
Who said the dogfighting was fair?
O sanguinário Barão Vermelho espalhava corpos e destroços em chamas pelos campos.
Any opponent who was below him was dead.
Até que um piloto aliado em um novo avião entrou no caminho do maior aviador do mundo. Na história humana, há capítulos críticos que reúnem um indivíduo ousado, uma situação crucial e uma tecnologia inovadora. É a fusão entre homem, momento e máquina.
Hi, I'm Hunter Ellis. Manfred von Richthofen, better known as the Red Baron, is a born hunter who finds his ideal hunting ground in the skies of World War I. Richthofen's primary weapon is the Albatross D-3 fighter plane. This combination of man and machine strikes fear in the hearts of the Allied pilots and creates a devastating force that leads to one of the bloodiest moments of the war.
Abril de 1917. Nesse único mês, o lendário asa alemão da aviação derrubou 21 aviões. Embora parecesse invencível, os pilotos aliados logo se equipariam com uma nova geração de aviões e desafiariam sua supremacia. Mais do que nunca, o Barão Vermelho precisaria de todo o seu talento para continuar vivo.
When you're one man in an airplane, you have one chance. And if that fellow across there is better than you are, and he gets the first shot, you're liable to be the one going down.
4 de agosto de 1914. A Alemanha lança a primeira ofensiva da Primeira Guerra Mundial e invade a neutra Bélgica. A Inglaterra imediatamente declarou guerra. No começo do conflito, o avião era uma invenção recente e os militares não sabiam bem como usá-lo.
The role hadn't really been developed as yet. What is an airplane going to do? They knew what a gun did, they knew what a tank did, but they didn't really know what an airplane was going to do.
A primeira missão do avião foi a de reconhecimento. Aviões batedores saíam com um piloto e um observador, um oficial treinado para fotografar movimentos de tropas e artilharia.
Reconnaissance was the most important military mission. It was vitally important that air services be able to protect their own reconnaissance aircraft operating deep in enemy territory, and vitally important that they shoot down the enemies.
Logo surgiram caças especializados, criados especialmente para perseguir aviões inimigos. Os caças precisavam de mais poder de fogo, mas levar uma pesada metralhadora a bordo era uma tarefa impraticável.
These airplanes are very flimsy wood and fabric creations. They are barely powered enough to get 2 men into the air stably. If you put a machine gun on some of them, they actually won't be able to take off.
Para abrir espaço para armas, os caças passaram a ter lugar só para o piloto, que também era o atirador. Mas isso criou mais um desafio.
If you're flying a tractor airplane with the propeller in the front, and you fire a gun from behind the propeller, it will shoot your propeller off and you will crash to your death as opposed to your opponent. So you have to figure out some way to miss your propeller.
Os alemães resolveram o problema em 1915 com um interruptor que sincronizava a metralhadora com a hélice. A arma disparava apenas nos intervalos em que a lâmina não estava na frente da arma. Essa inovação deu aos alemães uma importante vantagem. Como a maioria dos caças tinha armas na frente, os pilotos davam a volta para atirar na traseira do adversário. Chamava-se dogfighting, ou briga de cachorros, pois parecia um cão perseguindo a cauda de outro. Como o combate aéreo era algo inédito, cada piloto inventava suas táticas na prática.
They're doing something that's never been done before. There are no rules, there are no guidelines. They just make it up and figure it out.
Em 1916, um dos maiores ases da Alemanha era um piloto de 25 anos chamado Oswald Belke. Ele formalizou as regras do combate aéreo com uma série de táticas conhecida como Belke Dicta.
First and foremost, what you want is altitude. You want to be above your opponent. You want to see him before he sees you.
Keep the sun at your back so that your enemy will have to look into the sun to see you, which makes it more difficult.
Para Belke, a melhor tática era um mergulho na retaguarda do inimigo.
The worst position you can be in is having your enemy above you and behind you, because he can dive down, he can trade that potential energy of altitude into speed and catch you.
Com essa tática, Belke derrubou vários aviões e se tornou uma celebridade na Alemanha.
The pilots are a new breed. I mean, this is a new kind of hero. No army's ever had pilots before. And so when these fellows go up in the air and they start shooting down the enemy, people take note of it.
No verão de 1916, a Alemanha já controlava a Bélgica, Luxemburgo e partes do nordeste da França. Em julho, o exército alemão rechaçou uma vigorosa ofensiva aliada no Front de Somme.
The Germans were not going to be particularly concerned with controlling airspace over Britain and French territory. They would be more intent on defending against enemy airplanes coming over their territory to see what their army was doing.
No segundo ano da guerra, os aliados criaram unidades especializadas de caças.
The French had come up with escadrilles de chasse. The British were employing their fighters in squadrons. And the Germans realized they needed to do something like that.
As esquadrilhas alemãs chamavam-se Jagdstaffel ou Jasta e tinham de 12 a 18 aviões. Em agosto de 1916, Oswald Belke assumiu o comando da Jasta 2.
The mission of the Belke squadron was strictly air combat. Its purpose was strictly to clear the air on the German side of the front of Allied airplanes.
Belke has the authority to recruit any pilot he wants. One of his choices is a 23-year-old cavalry officer who's a novice flyer. This decision is the beginning of a union between man and machine that will create one of the boldest and most enduring military legends of all time. The officer's name is Baron Manfred von Richthofen.
Kapitän Belke, schon gut, schon gut. Bitte kommen Sie herein.
What Belke was looking for were pilots who might not yet have the requisite skills and knowledge to be functioning fighter pilots, but who had the drive and the determination and the aggressiveness. And he sees that clearly in Manfred von Richthofen.
What Belke sees in Richthofen is this young man with the fire. He is a killer. He's a soldier. And I think Belke realizes that that seriousness, that edge, is what you have to survive in the air.
Richthofen começou a carreira como piloto de combate em um dos primeiros aviões criados especificamente como caça, o Albatros D2. Seu motor pesado, mas potente, permitia que levasse 2 metralhadoras.
The Albatross is a fast airplane, ideal to dive down on these slow, unwieldy observation planes and shoot them down.
Sob o comando de Belke, Richthofen se sobressaiu e em 17 de setembro de 1916 derrubou o primeiro avião inimigo.
Your first confirmed victory produces absolute elation in any combat pilot. You have to remember that most pilots don't shoot anyone down.
Richthofen deu início à tradição de encomendar um copo de prata para cada conquista, com a data e os detalhes do avião abatido. Logo, ele se tornou o astro da esquadrilha.
There are other pilots that may be better aerobatic pilots than Richthofen. There may be other pilots that are as good a shot or even better than he is, but he is the best hunter. And that is not just certain skills, it's a mindset, it's an attitude. He's up there to shoot down the enemy
(23 de novembro de 1916). Richthofen era piloto de combate havia menos de 3 meses e tinha 10 vitórias quando enfrentou um britânico que pilotava um de Havilland DH-2.
By November 1916, the de Havilland DH-2 is starting to become obsolescent. It is a rotary engine pusher. It has a lot of wires and a lattice-like tail to accommodate the rear propeller that add drag, and compared with the Albatross, it's a rather rickety thing.
Richthofen knows that the plane is inferior to what he's flying. He knows that it's just a matter, it should be short work to shoot this plane down. What Richthofen suddenly discovers is he's chasing someone who's good, who's better at flying than maybe Richthofen is.
Nos controles do avião estava o maior piloto de combate britânico, o Major Lionel Roker.
Hawker, who already had a Victoria Cross because of some of his earlier exploits, was a superb pilot. He was a very fine airman. He had many of the same qualities that Richthofen had. He was called the English Belky.
Hawker began using maneuvers that Richthofen had never seen before. Richthofen was pulling all of his tricks, everything he could think of, and couldn't shake Hawker off his tail.
Após uma série de intensas manobras, Richthofen virou o jogo e conseguiu ficar atrás de Hawker. Estava prestes a obter a vitória de sua carreira quando, de repente, tudo deu errado. (23 de novembro de 1916). Depois de um longo combate aéreo, Manfred von Richthofen finalmente está em posição para derrubar o melhor piloto de caça britânico, o Major Lionel Hawker, quando suas 2 metralhadoras emperram.
This was a frequent problem with synchronized machine guns, which are dealing with this cam system to interrupt the gun whenever the propeller blade is in front of it.
Homem, momento e máquina. O homem é Manfred von Richthofen, o Barão Vermelho. O momento, o abril sangrento em 1917, está se aproximando. A máquina é o Albatross D3. Hawker, que tinha pouco combustível, tentou voltar para sua base.
The advantage to the Germans, almost always in this situation, is most of these dogfights are taking place over German territory, behind the German lines. So the British pilots have a longer way to go, they run out of gas.
Richthofen aproximou-se da cauda do de Havilland e finalmente desobstruiu as metralhadoras. O melhor piloto de caça britânico mergulhou para a morte a apenas 50 metros das linhas aliadas.
Richthofen understands at that moment it's not the quality of the box, it's the quality of the man in the box. And he's experienced what it's like when you have a good pilot who knows what he's doing. Doesn't matter that his plane is inferior to yours, he might beat you.
Richthofen is a tireless stalker who waits for exactly the right opportunity to present itself before striking. His proficiency as a killer is the result of his childhood passion, hunting in the forests of Germany.
Homem. Manfred von Richthofen nasceu em 2 de maio de 1892 em Breslau, na Prússia. Como todos os homens da família Richthofen, Manfred era um barão. A família foi elevada à nobreza em 1741 pelo rei da Prússia, Frederico o Grande. O pai de Manfred era oficial do exército e enviou o filho aos 11 anos para uma rígida escola militar.
His father has big expectations for his boys. He wants his boys to grow up to be soldiers.
Como muitos aristocratas, Manfred tinha paixão pela caça.
Richthofen learns early on that there's a difference between a hunter and a shooter. Richthofen's brother, Lothar, becomes the shooter. Richthofen is much more careful. He appreciates the stalking the prey. If the prey is smart and wily and has good instincts, all the better.
Richthofen também era excelente cavaleiro. Quando a Primeira Guerra Mundial começou em 1914, ele entrou na cavalaria prussiana como oficial. Mas em um campo de batalha dominado por metralhadoras, a cavalaria era ineficaz. Richthofen ficou na reserva.
Manfred von Richthofen became very unhappy as a cavalry officer. He has an aggressive personality. As he wrote to the emperor, I did not join the service to collect cheese and eggs. He wants combat.
Richthofen foi transferido para a aeronáutica e começou a carreira recolhendo informações em um avião batedor.
Richthofen was miserable. He hated being an observer. He wanted to be a pilot. The pilot was doing all the fun stuff. Richthofen's basically staring through binoculars. He despised the job. He wanted the action.
Em outubro de 1915, um encontro fortuito mudou a vida de Richthofen. Ele conheceu o grande Oswald Belk no vagão-restaurante de um trem.
Richthofen looks at Belk the way kids today look at somebody like Michael Jordan. I mean, he is the star. And every pilot, every young pilot like Richthofen emulates Belk.
Würden Sie uns etwas über Ihre Geschicktheit verraten? Eine Lehre, der wir folgen könnten?
Ich fliege nahe meiner Beute, ziele gut und wenn ich ihn schieße, fällt er runter. Bitte, bitte.
Dankeschön, Herr Kapitän.
Richthofen sentiu-se motivado e aprendeu a pilotar. E logo Belk o recrutou.
It also doesn't hurt that as an aristocrat, this is the kind of person who will symbolize to many Germans what they idealize most, and that is the Prussian aristocrat as a military leader.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Em setembro, ele se apresentou ao campo de aviação da Iasta 2 em Bertincourt, França.
Dann Manfred von Richthofen zum Dienst bereit, mein Herr.
Willkommen.
3 semanas depois, ele abateu o primeiro avião.
When he chose to engage the foe, his ability to judge distance, his ability to maneuver the aircraft, his ability to assess the situation and counter the opponent's moves went to high gain. He just really understood how to put that all together.
– 26 de outubro de 1916. Mal haviam se passado 2 meses depois do treinamento de Richthofen quando uma tragédia aconteceu. Oswald Belk morreu em uma colisão com um avião de sua própria esquadrilha. A carreira de Belk se encerrou com um inédito total de 40 aviões abatidos. A esquadrilha e a nação choraram sua perda.
The disaster of that is immeasurable. First of all, to the squadron, to Germany, to the morale of the German people, to the high command, but it's devastating personally to Richthofen.
By autumn of 1916, after 2 years of fighting, the war is at a stalemate. Shortages of food and fuel have taken their toll on the German people. When Oswald Belk dies, the fatherland loses its greatest hero, and the German command looks to Manfred von Richthofen to fill the gap.
Em janeiro de 1917, Richthofen estava a caminho dessa meta. Depois de conquistar 16 vitórias, ele recebeu a mais alta medalha alemã por bravura e o comando de sua própria esquadrilha, a Iasta 11.
Richthofen becomes probably the most widely known celebrity in Germany during the First World War. Someone who simply dominates the public's attention span. Everyone in Germany suddenly starts carrying what we would call trading cards, like baseball cards, with Richthofen's picture on them. He has a fan base. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He becomes a hero in every sense, even in the modern sense of that word.
Mas a Iasta 11 foi um teste para a liderança de Richthofen. A esquadrilha tinha 4 meses, era mal treinada e não derrubara um único avião inimigo. E os aviões Halberstadt que pilotavam não se comparavam ao Albatross. Em 16 de janeiro de 1917, Richthofen chegou a La Brayelle, França, para assumir o comando da precária esquadrilha.
I think he's much less concerned about his own reputation than he is with what he sees in front of him, which is a bunch of misfits pilots who have accomplished nothing. These people have not shot down anybody. They're a dismal-looking bunch. It's an enormous challenge.
Richthofen sentiu o peso de seu elevado cargo. E como o tempo bom da primavera se aproximava, ele precisava agir rápido.
People are quite cognizant that when weather clears, there is going to be a violent and cataclysmic battle there for control of the skies. There will be a clash between opposing doctrines and the opposing quality of the fighter forces, and one side or the other will emerge as a winner.
A pressão do alto comando alemão caiu sobre os ombros de Richthofen. Ele ajudaria a tirar a guerra do impasse e conquistaria a supremacia aérea.
Moment, ganz ernsthaft jetzt.
16 de janeiro de 1917. O maior asa-alemão Manfred von Richthofen assumiu o comando da Jasta 11, uma esquadrilha com pilotos inexperientes que ainda não haviam abatido um único avião inimigo.
He stands them up outside and he lectures them and he tells them, "You're not going to die with me in command. You know, if you go up with the track record you have, you are all going to be killed. I'm not going to put up with that."
Os ineptos pilotos receberam ajuda na forma de um novo avião, a geração seguinte do Albatross, o D-3. Com ele, Richthofen conquistou a primeira vitória para a esquadrilha e mandou que seu avião fosse pintado de um vibrante vermelho.
Richthofen wants his plane to be identifiable by any opponent who sees it. He does want them to know he's there. In no uncertain terms, it's a great announcement. I'm Richthofen, I'm here, I'm in this red plane. If you want to fight, let's fight.
Richthofen's Albatross stands out as the only red plane on the front. Jasta 11's other pilots follow his lead, painting their planes bright colors, each with a warrior's splash of red. The D3 inspires confidence in Richthofen's students, and it should. It's superior to anything else in the air.
Máquina. O Albatross D3 tem 7 metros de comprimento e envergadura de 9 metros. Sua fuselagem tinha cobertura de compensado. É uma variação do biplano chamado de sesquiplano, pois tinha as asas inferiores mais curtas. A asa superior era maior e a asa inferior usava apenas uma viga como apoio.
The single-spar wing's greatest advantage over normal biplane was that there was less area below, and if a pilot's looking down, he has a better view of what's going on down there. And spotting the enemy before he can spot you is a major advantage.
O Albatross tinha motor Mercedes de 160 cavalos vapor, que lhe proporcionava uma velocidade de 165 km por hora. Não era tão veloz quanto o francês Spad 7, que fazia 190 km por hora. Mas o Albatross tinha o dobro do alcance e o dobro do poder de fogo do Spad. Eram duas metralhadoras Spandau, de 7,92 mm contra uma única metralhadora Vickers do Spad.
The idea of being able to stalk and hunt one's prey in it was perfect for Richthofen.
I'm at the old Rhinebeck Aerodrome in New York, which has the world's largest collection of flying World War I aircraft. And I'm here with Chad Willey, one of its pilots, and Chad's going to take me flying today. How you doing, Chad?
Hi, Hunter. Glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Now, this is a beautiful aircraft. What is this?
This is an Albatross D5A, very similar to the Albatross D3 that Richthofen flew.
Now, is it okay if I peek in the cockpit?
Certainly.
All right. Wow. It's pretty simple in here. Not the type of control stick I was expecting, actually.
Not very many gauges, but in their own way, they had some complications. They had dual firing triggers for each machine gun. They could fire each one individually or separately in case they had a gun jam.
We'll actually get to see what the tactics were that Richthofen developed and became so successful with.
Yes, we will. I'm going to use a couple of techniques that he used. Use my speed and altitude to dive on you, keep you in the sights for about 3 seconds or so, and see if I can shoot you down.
Okay, I'm very used to that, so we'll see how it goes up there today. Looking forward to it. Fight's on.
Como muitas vítimas do Barão Vermelho, sou um alvo fácil nesse avião de 2 lugares. Nos combates aéreos da Primeira Guerra Mundial, a altitude era a principal vantagem do piloto na hora de atacar. O avião mais alto podia escolher o momento do ataque e ganhar velocidade enquanto mergulhava em direção ao inimigo. Em 2 momentos, Chad nos manteve na mira durante mais de 3 segundos. Se ele fosse o Barão Vermelho, agora seríamos mais um copo de prata em sua estante.
Yeah, cool.
Com essa técnica e o Albatross D3, Richthofen transformou seus pilotos em uma força de ataque superior. Sua fama se espalhou além da Alemanha e jornais ingleses o chamaram de o sanguinário Barão Vermelho.
The British press is serving German propaganda very well because they're giving him this larger-than-life image, this sort of aura, this legend around this character. Well, if you're a British pilot, you have to deal with that.
24 de janeiro de 1917. Nos céus da França, um avião batedor britânico fotografava o território ocupado pelos alemães. De repente, o Barão Vermelho surgiu em frente ao sol.
If you're a British reconnaissance pilot in a 2-seat aircraft, that most of which of them are out of date, you're basically, to put it bluntly, dog meat.
Richthofen mergulhou sobre o avião e atirou no motor e no tanque de combustível. Foi sua 18ª vitória. Enquanto assistia à queda do avião inimigo, ele de repente se viu em apuros.
His plane is falling apart. The wing on his albatross is cracking.
O sanguinário Barão Vermelho estava prestes a cair devido a uma falha em seu próprio avião.
Imagine the horror of the fact that it's not the British pilot who's going to kill him, it's his own plane.
De janeiro de 1917. Manfred von Richthofen acabara de abater um avião de reconhecimento britânico quando seu próprio avião apresentou um grave problema. A asa inferior estava prestes a se quebrar.
Richthofen's initial reaction, like most of the other pilots who experienced it, was alarm. Here was a plane that looked like a world beater, but it has a very serious Achilles heel to it.
Richthofen conseguiu fazer um pouso de emergência, mas ficou claro que o novo D3 tinha uma falha estrutural. Dias antes, 2 pilotos de outra esquadrilha haviam morrido devido ao mesmo problema.
By this time, Richthofen and his Albatross are having a huge, intimidating effect on the enemy. But if word of the wing failure leaks, it could damage the psychological edge that he and his airplane enjoy. The high command needs to locate the source of the problem and find a solution, fast.
A culpada era a viga única da asa inferior. Estava situada muito longe da borda de ataque, o que enfraquecia a asa durante manobras acentuadas.
That single spar lower wing on the Albatross is going to be a problem if anyone pushes the plane too hard. And this can be a tremendous disadvantage in aerial combat.
Enquanto o Albatross era consertado, Richthofen pilotou um avião menos potente. Mesmo assim, nas semanas seguintes atingiu a marca de 20 aviões abatidos.
Manfred von Richthofen became superhuman at 20 kills, and that was only a quarter of the way into his record. His picture literally hung in almost every German home.
Em março de 1917, Lothar, o irmão mais novo de Manfred, entrou para a esquadrilha.
Glückwunsch und willkommen bei Jaster 11. Ja, ist ganz gut, dass du auch dabei bist.
O alto comando viu que seria uma boa propaganda ter dois Richthofens voando juntos.
Manfred von Richthofen says, I am a hunter. My brother Lothar is a butcher. He was referring to the fact that Lothar would just charge right in, hell for leather, and shoot at anything that moved.
Uma semana depois, enquanto a Inglaterra se preparava para atacar, o D3 voltou à ação. A asa inferior recebera um reforço. Mas os pilotos precisariam controlar a velocidade na descida ou as asas podiam quebrar.
To know that there's a limit that you have to put on the plane for fear of your wings falling off? No, that's not good for pilot morale.
9 de abril de 1917. A Inglaterra deu início à ofensiva a Arras, com um extenso bombardeio que atingiu mais de 6 quilômetros do território ocupado pela Alemanha.
The British have this sense that perhaps if they push hard enough, they might be able to break the Germans.
Para a Alemanha, abril era um mês decisivo.
They have to achieve control of the air in April because all the intelligence estimates indicate that the Allies will be introducing within a month higher performance airplanes.
It is going to be neither quiet on the Western Front nor over the Western Front for the next month to come.
Para responder à ofensiva britânica, a Jasta 11 fazia patrulhas constantes a partir da base em La Brayelle, França. Em uma área de cerca de 1.000 km², Richthofen chegava a fazer 4 voos por dia. Em 13 de abril, ele bateu o recorde de Oswald Belk ao derrubar seu 41º avião.
I'm certain that in Richthofen there was, in some respects, this sense of having honored Belk's legacy, and the pupil has learned from the master. Now the pupil is going to exceed the master.
With Britain taking massive losses, the British dubbed the month Bloody April. By the 22nd, Jasta 11 alone records its 100th kill. But in a business where one mistake can cost you your life, each success brings the Red Baron that much closer to running out of luck.
O dia 29 de abril de 1917 amanheceu claro. O tempo estava perfeito para voar. Richthofen saiu em uma patrulha com o irmão Lothar.
They're having a great time because they know, one, they're superior to their enemy. Two, Richthofen has this squadron he has formed around him with men that he trusts impeccably. And three, best of all, he's got his brother to fly with. They make the perfect hunting pair.
Mas o inimigo estava se tornando mais perigoso. Richthofen logo encontraria uma nova geração de aviões criados para superar o Albatroz. Sua reputação como o maior dos ases estava prestes a ser desafiada. – 29 de abril de 1917. Manfred von Richthofen e seu irmão Lothar patrulhavam o espaço aéreo sobre a França ocupada pela Alemanha. Não demoraram a avistar 3 caças franceses Spad 7 pilotados por britânicos.
Although the Spad 7 is an extremely sturdy airplane, Richthofen shoots the wings right off it, which gives you an idea of what his marksmanship was at that point. And as Richthofen describes it, the fuselage plummets to earth like a flaming stone.
Homem, momento e máquina. O homem é o Barão Vermelho. A máquina, o Albatroz D3, um avião de guerra com grande poder de fogo. O momento é o abril sangrento. quando a batalha pela supremacia aérea atinge seu clímax mais violento.
With 49 kills, Manfred von Richthofen has defied the odds. Statistically, he should have been killed long ago. The High Command wants him to stop flying, preferring the propaganda value of a living war hero to a dead one. In just a few days, he'll go on leave, not knowing if he'll be allowed to return. But before he goes, he wants to raise his tally to an even 50.
Quando Manfred e seu irmão voltaram para o campo de pouso, o pai deles, Albrecht von Richthofen, chegou para visitá-los.
They both came back and they leapt out of their airplanes, and his brother goes up and says, Father, I've just shot down a British airplane. And Richthofen leaps out of his airplane and goes up to the old man and says, and I did too.
Durante o almoço, um avião de reconhecimento alemão foi atacado em cima do campo de pouso. Enquanto os corpos dos tripulantes eram retirados, a atmosfera tornou-se sombria.
At that point, von Richthofen observes his father becomes a little more serious because he then becomes aware that anyone can fall in this war, including his sons.
Naquela tarde, Richthofen saiu e encontrou um avião de reconhecimento inglês sem escolta. Era um alvo fácil.
It's not really a fair and equal combat, but that's not the objective of the First World War anyway. We're not talking about chivalry or fairness. The objective is to catch your opponent at a disadvantage and shoot him full of holes and kill him.
Com 300 disparos de metralhadora, Richthofen atingiu a emblemática marca de 50 vitórias. Horas depois, outro avião inglês sucumbiu às armas de Richthofen. Em um só dia, os irmãos haviam derrubado 5 aviões. Mas todos eram inferiores aos Albatross.
This moment of time, April 1917, the Albatross is at the pinnacle of its development. Its fighter force is at the pinnacle of their abilities, but that can change very, very rapidly.
Então, bem acima deles, Richthofen avistou uma esquadrilha com 11 novos triplanos Sopwith ingleses. Os aviadores alemães haviam sido alertados sobre esse novo avião criado para superar o Albatross.
The Sopwith triplane is a magnificent and beautiful aircraft. It is highly maneuverable and well-armed. It is a dangerous opponent to the Albatross D3.
Pela primeira vez, o Albatross de Richthofen, principalmente devido à asa frágil, era o provável perdedor.
What he sees immediately is that the Sopwith triplane is more maneuverable, it's faster, it can turn on a dime, and Richthofen takes the challenge.
Os triplanos estavam sobre eles em perfeita posição de ataque.
When the triplanes dive, the albatrosses know they're coming, and the technique is to turn to meet, which means that Richthofen and his peers are perfectly well prepared to do business with the English.
O Barão Vermelho abriu fogo contra seu atacante. O triplano desviou-se dos tiros, ficando debaixo do Albatross. Foi um erro grave que deu vantagem a Richthofen.
Triplane, you want to keep altitude. You don't ever want either to join combat or descend below the opponent in the Albatross, because once you descend below him, the Albatross simply will turn on your tail and riddle you.
O piloto, percebendo seu erro, partiu em direção às linhas aliadas. O Albatross não seria capaz de alcançá-lo e Richthofen tentou outra tática. Voltou a disparar, embora estivesse longe e não tivesse chance de acertar o triplano. O piloto do Sopwith tentou se desviar e com isso perdeu velocidade. Foi um erro fatal.
Richthofen keeps his plane in a straight line. Well, the result is he gains speed.
Richthofen ficou a 45 metros do avião, tão perto que ouvia o silvo do tanque de combustível enquanto suas balas o destruíam. Foi o 52º avião abatido por ele, e com 4 vitórias em um só dia, o Barão Vermelho vivia seu melhor momento.
With all the disadvantages handed to Richthofen, Richthofen wins. He shoots down the British plane, and ultimately, I don't think that's a surprise to Richthofen, because I think he very well understands it's not the box, it's the man who flies the box.
Em abril de 1917, os britânicos atingiram o ponto mais baixo na guerra aérea. Em 4 semanas, perderam 1/3 dos tripulantes, mais de 900 homens e 150 aviões. A Iasta 11 fora responsável por 89 vitórias, mais da metade dos aviões abatidos.
The leadership in the Royal Flying Corps was very distressed by the losses they were taking, and they knew that they had inferior aircraft. So they were really pushing as hard as they could to bring newer, better airplanes into production and get them to the front, get them in the hands of their pilots.
Os alemães também haviam sofrido perdas, 159 tripulantes e 77 aeronaves. De modo geral, o Abril Sangrento fora um triunfo para os alemães, mas foi também a última vez que tiveram o domínio aéreo na Primeira Guerra Mundial. Aquele mês marcou o começo do fim para o Albatroz. A produção britânica se intensificou e os aliados passaram a ter mais aviões que os superavam.
It was at that point that the Germans realized they were now looking at a disadvantage in the air rather than a positive advantage that they enjoyed all the way through the first part of World War I.
Para Manfred von Richthofen, o Abril Sangrento foi o auge da sua carreira. Em um único mês, ele derrubara 21 aviões. Mas 2 meses depois, sua sorte mudou quando atacou um avião de reconhecimento que deveria ter sido uma presa fácil.
The observer is shooting at him wildly, way out of range, and Richthofen is sort of chuckling to himself that, yeah, I've seen this before. One of the bullets strikes him in the head. It's just bad luck.
Richthofen nunca se recuperaria totalmente do ferimento, embora tenha continuado a voar e a conquistar vitórias. Em setembro de 1917, o velho Albatroz de Richthofen foi substituído pelo Fokker DR-1. O pequeno e ágil caça era um feroz adversário para os modelos ingleses.
The Albatross was, of course, von Richthofen's primary aircraft, his primary steed, until he had accomplished 60 kills. At that point, along came the Fokker DR-1, the airplane for which he's probably most noted for, but actually the aircraft that he spent the least time in.
21 de abril de 1918. Richthofen fazia uma patrulha com seu triplano Fokker quando ignorou abertamente as regras que o haviam mantido vivo e vitorioso por tanto tempo. Avistou o avião de um piloto inexperiente e começou a persegui-lo sobre linhas inimigas e dentro do alcance da artilharia terrestre.
By that time, Richthofen is very tired and exhausted. His wound has not healed. He's still a highly proficient aerial killer. The man is no longer the same man.
O maior as de todos os tempos foi derrubado e morto com uma única bala no peito.
There was a great dispute after he was shot down as to whether Captain Roy Brown in the Sopwith Camel trailing had shot him down or whether the Australian gunners from the ground shot him down. In some respects, it really didn't make a lot of difference. He was dead.
Richthofen morreu 2 semanas antes de completar 26 anos. Os aliados o sepultaram com todas as honras militares. Seu total de 80 vitórias em combate não foi superado por nenhum aviador de nenhuma das frentes da Primeira Guerra Mundial. O irmão de Manfred, Lothar, sobreviveu à guerra, mas morreu em um acidente de avião em 1922, aos 27 anos.
Manfred von Richthofen deserves to be recognized as an extraordinary military hero, not just a German military hero, an extraordinary hero to anyone who understands how difficult it is to be a fighter pilot, who understands how primitive those airplanes were, the challenge of facing an adversary in horrible physical conditions, and the fact that Richthofen did it better than anyone.
Manfred von Richthofen and the Albatross are a rare combination of uncanny talent and exquisite engineering that appear at a moment in the war when the outcome is far from decided. During that deadly month of April 1917, man and machine unite to give Germany a glimmer of hope for victory. It also marks another appearance of the M3 factor, a force we'll continue to target on Man, Moment, Machine.